You are listening to the Break Time Tech Talks podcast, a bite-sized tech podcast for busy developers, where we'll briefly cover technical topics, news snippets, and more in short time blocks. I'm your host, Jennifer Reif, an avid developer and problem solver with special interest in data, learning, and all things technology. Honestly, I have been a bit scattered this week, but things are coming together and I have made a good amount of progress. I am working on the book and giving an online workshop. I have produced a lot of content and really enjoyed the results this week. Then I keep hearing a couple of terms and topics that I want to pick apart a bit and found an article that dives into that more with some perspectives I hadn't considered before. Let me catch you up. One of the things I have run across, and it seems innocuous enough, and while we could debate terminology and specifics over, well, you should or should not do this or that, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. But I keep hearing this term intelligent reasoning or intelligence in conjunction with AI and the AI technologies. However, I do think it's important to note that intelligence in this context is really only when humans are providing the context to allow them to account for external perspectives. AI and large language models on their own are not intelligent, at least not yet. Right? That's a very fine line that we are running right now. But I do think it's very important to clarify because it's very easy for us to use, well, they seem very intelligent. They seem very smart. They produce a lot of really interesting and seemingly intelligent output, right? But at this point in time, they are not actually intelligent, sentient systems. And these things only seem intelligent when that important information is surfaced in order for them to take that into account. They're not intelligent on their own. Remember, they are mathematical algorithms. They are pattern machines. They are not sentient, feeling, thinking systems, at least not at this point. Will we get there? I don't know. But at least at this point, it is very important to clarify that whether we use that terminology or not that's up for debate for those deep thinkers that are far beyond my skill level. But I do think it is important that when we throw this term intelligent around, that we use it very, very loosely. They're seemingly intelligent. They are analyzing really well, and they seem on the surface level very smart, but there's no real understanding of these complex concepts and societal things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis as humans. It is so easy for us to feel lulled into the buzzwords of the day because that's all we hear all around. That's all we're surrounded with. But we developers really know better. We know how this stuff actually works, at least as of now. It cannot recreate human intelligence. It can mimic it. It cannot create it. So I think that's very important. We'll dive into kind of another very fine line delineation here in just a bit. Now, the few things that I've been working on this week are I ran a GraphRAG fundamentals online training last night, which was super fun. That's one of the reasons why this podcast episode is just a bit late in getting published today. But I had to prep for a bunch of that, make sure everything was up and running and ready to go for that, and then give that training late last night. I had some really fantastic questions and some very engaged attendees online for the training. So that was super fun and exciting. The thing that I really love about giving this course is I focus the content around building the foundational skills of LLMs and RAG and GraphRAG so that attendees will hopefully walk away with knowledge and ideas to add on top of those. So once they have those foundational building block things, you can build on top of those and abstract certain things away and make it cleaner and easier and more efficient for your particular use case. But understanding those foundational concepts, I feel, is super important. I also am still working on the book. I'm coming up on a deadline at the end of the summer for the rest of the book. So we've got about half of it done. We have the other half remaining, and the deadline is at the end of the summer for that. So I have a very intense writing schedule, but I am still enjoying the process, at least most days. The current chapter I'm working on is talking about collections. This is a AI first Java book. So it's focusing on Java language and learning Java in this age of AI. And so this chapter is focusing all around learning collections. I have found throughout my writing of all of the chapters I've covered so far, I've found some preferences for how I like to approach topics and concepts, but I am still figuring out the flow. And I feel like the flow for each chapter is a bit different. Sometimes I will dig into certain concepts more, or I'll move faster over certain things, or I want to dig in and gloss over something or not. And so I'm finding that each chapter is just a little bit different in how deep I go, how much I feel is important for an early learner, and the types of examples and how many examples that I provide throughout the chapter, depending on how complex the topic is. It changes and adapts as I go. And so every chapter, while it has similar themes and outline structure, is differing a little bit in how detailed and my approach to it. Now, the big questions for each chapter are what to cover, when do I cover those things, and what to leave out. Those are the tough things. And those, again, I battle with every chapter. I do feel like as a whole for my workload, events do seem to have slowed just a bit, at least for the summer, which is really good with all the other things that are sitting on my plate right now. However, fall forecasting is looking rather booked up already. So we'll see where that leads. It'll be super exciting, but it'll be very busy as well. I do also have some ideas for a couple of experiments, but I just really haven't had a lot of time to devote to them just yet. I'm hoping to get to those eventually. They're just sitting on the back burner for right now. First up, I'd like to explore code base analysis. This was after an event that I attended a few weeks ago. I had some folks doing some code base analysis tooling and trying to do some cool stuff with AI, things like JQ Assistant and similar things like that. I'd like to dig into that a little bit more. I've always wanted to play with JQ Assistant, and I've dabbled here and there on a very surface level, but now I have some ideas of how I can explore that a little bit better thanks to the folks that I interacted with. So I would love to play around with that. I also really want to streamline some of the manual bits of putting together content. If you've listened to some other episodes on my channel, you may have heard me talk about some automation practices or little tidbits that I'm trying to reduce some of the boilerplate I have for creating things that I really enjoy creating. For instance, I love writing tech blog posts. I like doing this podcast. I really enjoy writing the book and other types of technical content. I really want to focus more on those bits and less on the pre and post processing steps that I do for that. I'm hoping to try to automate some of those bits just a little bit more, hopefully maybe using AI to help me do that. But that way I can focus on the content writing and design of the content itself rather than those manual pre and post processing bits. I'm not sure exactly how this will take form just yet, but I am noodling on some ideas there. The article I want to cover for this week is called Code is Cheap, Show Me the Talk by Kailash Nod, and I hope I pronounced that correctly. LDR for this blog post is software development, as it has been done for decades, is over. LLM coding tools have changed it fundamentally for the better or worse. Now, that statement feels just a little bit dramatic to me, but the core of it is kind of true. Things are definitely different in the software development industry and the practices and the way that we approach it. The author talks a bit about his background in technology, his career, and the general tech industry history, at least from his perspective. Then he goes into a bit about open source software, how you could tell a good repository from a bad one. For instance, if you opened up a GitHub repository and you were trying to look at how much care and time has the author invested in this open source repository, you could look at the documentation, you could look for a good README and other types of hints that would tell you that the author cared and invested the time and the effort in those what is often seen as less important tasks. I'm using air quotes around that, less important, right? Those are super valuable things, but often in the development space, they're left and secondary tasks. Now, those would help you pinpoint how much care and effort and time somebody had invested in that. It is a little bit more difficult to tell that now because AI happens to help with so many of those tasks. AI can generate really good documentation. They can generate a really good README. They can pour in some of those details that a lot of software developers miss or care less about, and they can cover those pretty well. So it's less easy for us now to look at a repository and say, oh, the author really took the time and care and is really invested in the success of this repository. They may still be, but it's at least harder to tell that from a surface level. Now, the author also talks about that it used to take effort to write 10,000 lines of good code. That's the differentiating factor there. Good code, not just code. And build a good technical career. It took a lot of time, a lot of investment, and some motivation to have a good technical career. Now, you can still have a good technical career, right? You can build those skills, but you do have to work a little bit harder at it now. Slop has existed, and I loved this section in the article. Slop has existed in software forever. It just happened to be easier to spot pre-AI. The author points out that people can be trained in software with a few classes, a boot camp, some books, or varying levels of degrees. However, doctors are required to go through rigorous training for years. Whether you agree, disagree, or like or dislike this point, I find it really interesting because I never really thought about it like this. Software runs our major financial markets, our global financial markets, our healthcare systems, our building access, purchasing systems. If technology shut down today, the whole world would go dark. But we don't think anything of a developer who's self-trained or took a few classes over one who has a degree or more degrees in the field. And whether that's a good thing or bad thing is not for me to point out here. That's not my intention at all here. But I just do find it interesting that it's like, wow, we don't gatekeep software development as a career at all, which is really fascinating and really cool. But on the other hand, it's like, ooh, for a career in an industry that runs basically everything else, that does allow a lot of room for slop potentially. The author's point is that those in any field with poor skills or poor motivation will produce poor results. And those with good motivation and empathy will produce good results, just like any other career, with or without AI coding tools. You get both good and bad no matter what you do, whether you have AI tools or no AI tools. It is just harder to tell how much effort a human might have put in behind the scenes now that you have AI kind of covering some of those gaps that were easy to pick up on before. My favorite section of the entire article was missing the forest for the trees. This section goes into talking about pre-AI, humans still produced bad code with IDEs, syntax highlighting, and other helpful tools. It's easy to get stuck in the hype that either AI will solve all our problems, or on the opposite end of the spectrum, in the pit of despair that it's awful and needs to go away. However, the author points out that it's incredibly inspiring to see people who have never had access to build software be able to design and build tools to help make their lives or work better. It's not all roses and sunshine either. Having a lack of respect for data, good design, and personal privacy are terrible practices, and those do need some improvement in this AI age. The biggest human cost that the author points out is to the junior developer that is left to fend for themselves. It is less important to be able to write the syntax, although the author points out it's still important for reading and understanding the code, which is still helpful in today's age. But it's more important to understand architecture, design, and to communicate those concepts, the architecture, the design of the code. New developers need to foster those skills and learn in different ways. And long-term technical folks have an opportunity to help newer developers build those skills and bring all of us into a stronger community. I hope this article was helpful. I found it thought-provoking and interesting. From online training to book writing to deep thinking, I felt like I made some strides this week. I got a lot of value from the challenge and the topics. The book deadline is keeping me to task, and I prepped and gave an online workshop as well, which added some challenges but was also really fun. Finally, there is a lot of buzz around developer careers in the AI era, and I found an article that raised some interesting points even through the contrast we currently face. I'll be back on another episode. As always, thanks for listening and happy coding.